divorce support professional panel here on a Saturday morning for myself anyways. And we've got a variety of different professionals here all on the topic of divorce and separation. So this is the building of a valuable resource for people contemplating separation and going through separation and divorce. It will answer questions that they will have all in one spot. The panel discussion is being broadcasted to Facebook and to YouTube. It will also be available in audio and later transcribed to written form to later become a Q&A pocketbook. So without further ado, I am going to get into our Q&A with our amazing panel. What I'm going to do is when everybody else, when the question is directed to a certain person, if everybody else would just mute their microphone just to avoid any background noise if possible. And then when the question comes to you, just remember to unmute yourself. So my name is Angie Sinclair, and I am the owner and founder of Shell to Shine. I am a relationship and divorce coach. I am launching the Phoenix Rising talk show, which is going to be airing this Wednesday and every Wednesday going forward at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I am also a motivational and empowerment speaker. I've brought together varied professionals from different areas to help us out in what can be a very confusing and emotional time. And we often need somebody in a third person perspective to help make sense of that. So first of all, we're going to bring in Nicole Sherry Oden, who is a family lawyer, family law attorney. And we're going to start with a Q&A directed to her. So Nicole, you are based out of California. Can you just do a brief intro for yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Nicole Sherry Oden. I am a licensed attorney here in California. I've been licensed for almost 9 years now. I practice family law and contract law, but the focus is on settlement-minded family law. I am a huge proponent for making sure that the family understands that while you're going through a transitional time period, at the end of this process, you will still remain a family, albeit a different kind of structured one. And my main goal in my practice is to really make sure that the family maintains their estate rather than bleeding it out and paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to attorneys and ending up in a much worse position. I think that making sure you have a solid foundation to start your life off right, that next new chapter is so important. And I think that there are tools and tactics that you can take to make sure that you do that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So our first question is, what is the easiest way to resolve a divorce?
Before I jump in, I'm going to give my standard kind of disclaimer. I'm an attorney, so it's just something that I have to make sure I do. Everything I share today is legal education and information. It is not legal advice. It doesn't create an attorney-client relationship between us. And you do want to make sure you chat with an attorney in your local area to make sure that you're taking the right steps for your family law matter. As I said, I'm licensed in California, and family law does differ state to state across the United States. So the biggest thing that you can do, I think, to make sure that you are resolving your divorce as kind of expeditiously as possible is to be amicable. There is a process here in California called Uncontested Dissolution, and it basically means that you and your spouse are able to reach an agreement. And I know that that can seem daunting to people who are going through this kind of state of flux. You know, they may have had a spouse that cheated on them. They may have had something else happen, something that kind of diminished your trust for your spouse. They've overspent. They've, driven up the cost of your debt. There's all sorts of reasons that people divorce, but I think that there is a way to make sure that you can separate the emotion from the divorce process and look at the divorce process as a business transaction, as hard as that is, which is why I'm a huge proponent of having mental health professionals involved in the divorce process. I think it's a very, very important thing for every family. And in California, 95% of our cases actually do settle before trial. So you can save yourself a lot of time, money, and headache by just kind of, looking at it as a business transaction, taking the emotions out of it, and sitting down and looking at a process that makes the most sense for your certain situation. There are cases where litigation is necessary, and that's very unfortunate. Cases of domestic violence, cases, there are situations if you're dealing with somebody on the other side who's just going to be completely unreasonable and they need somebody in the black robe to tell them how things are going to go. But there are so many other processes that you can choose that keep you outside of court, that will let you process through and, like I said, retain some of that wealth for your family and for your children, especially if you have kids involved. You don't want them to be, taken through this process that can take upwards of 5 years. I mean, here in California, we now have legislation that tries to push cases through in 2 years. They're doing their best. But there are cases that they just become kind of this War of the Roses situation, and that's not what's best for the family at the end of the day. So looking at a process like collaborative or even mediation, which are things that I think are becoming much more wide known versus just that typical litigation model, I think is a very, very good thing to do. So educate yourself from day one, I think is one of the best things you can do, and then making the decision to proceed amicably.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. That's so important. So what steps should be taken to protect both parties?
Well, like I said, I think the very, very first thing you can do is educate yourself. Even if you decide that you are going to try and kind of go it alone and represent yourself in pro per, I highly recommend that you schedule a consultation with a family law attorney to just sit down and get to know your rights and do your research and make sure that you are aware of what needs to happen. I am a big proponent of having an attorney involved versus representing yourself, but there are processes that can minimize that cost, such as limited scope counsel, which is one of kind of the more amicable processes where the attorney comes in and it's like an a la carte menu, essentially. They can help you with very limited circumstances. If there's one issue that you just know you're not going to be able to resolve, like child custody, the attorney can come in and assist. Or if you have to file a motion for, say, temporary spousal support, or you need attorney's fees to proceed, they can just file the motion on your behalf, appear for that, and then you can handle the rest of the case. But without kind of knowing what's at stake, it's really, really hard to make decisions, and especially because it is such an emotional process. It's your life at the end of the day. So that thought of, divorcing the emotions from looking at it like a business transaction can be really, really hard. But having that professional insight to kind of walk you through what that looks like is so important. And I think getting finances organized, a lot of the time there's one spouse who's primarily in charge of paying the bills and handling the finances, and they know what's coming in and out of the checkbook on a monthly basis. And the other spouse is just kind of in the dark. When you know that you're kind of taking those steps to separate and start the dissolution process, getting educated about your finances and getting organized and kind of knowing what the lay of the land is one of the most important things you can do. Here in California, we're actually required to prepare preliminary declarations of disclosure. And that basically is the roadmap for your entire case. It lays out income, expenses, your assets, your debts. So you really have a solid roadmap of what the financial picture of your divorce looks like. So I think working on those from day one is really, really key.
Mm-hmm. Preparation, right? Just being able to see it laid out. So what is worth fighting for and what is worth letting go?
Yeah, family law is a very unique area of the law because every family is different. The process is going to look different for every single family, and different families have different priorities. I think the one thing to keep in mind is that nobody wins in their divorce. This isn't something where there's going to be a victorious, aha, I got it over my spouse. You're still going through divorce. Your family is still separating, it's transitioning. So I think kind of keeping your eyes on the prize and advocating for things that you and your children, if there's children involved, really, really need at the end of the day, and not the things that you think you're owed is a really important step. Again, I'm going to go back to that whole kind of separating the emotion out of the process. Because going to battle, I know I have a lot of clients come in and say, I want a pit bull attorney. I want to go after him. He wronged me or she wronged me, and I want to make them pay. That's just not the right attitude to have if you're going to navigate this process and come out on the other side feeling somewhat unscathed. Because going to battle like that will end up costing you hundreds of thousands of dollars to really put on that full fight. I mean, especially here, look, I'm in Southern California. Our average hourly attorney rate can range anywhere from $300 to $1,200 an hour. And that adds up quickly when you have somebody that just wants to battle.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of just keeping that mindset that nobody wins and that I really just want to advocate for what I need. And especially if you have kids, knowing that what's in their best interest should really always be guiding the process. Your kids are your kids. You don't want to be sharing about the process with them. You don't want to be talking about how horrendous your spouse is, because your child's going to internalize that. At the end of the day, your child's still half of your spouse. And so if you're sitting there talking about how terrible your ex is, they're internalizing that. And part of them is going to say, oh my gosh, well, half of me must be terrible. And they just get stuck in the middle. So I think child custody is one of the most kind of highly contested issues. And I think that that can be a space to really sit down and focus on what's best for your kids. But yeah, I just think that mentality of knowing you're looking at what's really important and what your needs are is key.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Such valuable information for people that don't know what that roadmap can look like. So thank you so much for that insight. I'm going to go to Betty Draughtsman, who is our real estate expert in the room. So how complicated, actually, you know what, I'm going to just step back a bit. Can you just give us an intro to yourself?
Hi, good morning, Angie, my fellow panelists. My name is Betty Draughtsman. I am a licensed realtor in the city of Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. I've been licensed since 2006. I specialize in residential home and condominium sales, both the brand new and the resale. My goal whenever I work with clients when buying or selling is to facilitate the transaction and make it as stress-free as possible, to make it as easy as possible. I like to inform my clients on the pros, the cons, the consequences of the decisions that they may be making and choosing, and just helping them along the entire process so that there's no hiccups, no surprises, hopefully no problems on sale date, possession date, that sort of thing, and that they're happy with their transaction and the service that I've provided with them. I'm so happy to say that, Angie, you're one of them, but a lot of my clients become friends as well after the sale. So it's not just about the transaction; it's about nurturing relationships so that you can put yourself out there and help people. And I love helping people, and I love what I do.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's, we do have a fabulous relationship, and I'm so thankful that you're able to join us this morning.
Thank you.
So with the sale within divorce, how complicated is settling a house sale when divorce is involved?
So the actual selling of the house itself is seldom complicated. Where it can get complicated is when you factor in the human element. And what I mean by that is if both parties are not on the same page, they're not working towards this as a common goal, there will likely be challenges. It could be something like sometimes one side doesn't want the divorce at all, and they'll do everything they can to stall or prevent the sale or even sabotage the sale. It may be that the owners cannot agree on the value to list the home at. One spouse wants an extravagant amount of money. The other one says, no, that's not realistic. And listing a home at an unrealistic asking price is counterproductive and in fact can hurt the overall sale value in the end. Other less common issues, but they do still happen, can include where one party is the registered owner on title and the spouse has acquired homestead rights in the property, but now they're refusing to relinquish those rights to allow the sale. What if there is a former spouse, like an ex, who they were the first to acquire homestead rights, now trying to find that ex and convincing them to sign off on the rights is yet another hurdle. And I've seen this before. Divorces can get contentious. They can get very much, into a battle, as Nicole said. And another potential complication is when both parties stop paying on the mortgage, the property taxes, the utilities, and things like that, and it goes into arrears. So in a short period of time, the bank is going to start sending reminders, demand letters, and if not addressed, the property will eventually go into foreclosure. And this can happen relatively quickly over just a few months.
So what factors should be considered when selling or buying out one party's share?
So first and foremost, obviously, the couple needs to be in agreement as to whether or not they are going to sell the marital home, or if they are in fact having one party buy the other person out. If selling the home, regardless of whether it is a divorce situation or not, it's ideal for the homeowners to confirm whether or not there is a mortgage interest penalty applicable, and if yes, how much is it? So this is a penalty for breaking your mortgage agreement before the term is up. So each lender has different regulations, so it's best to check with your lender and to get that information in writing so that there's no misunderstanding. You don't want to be surprised later on finding out that you have a large interest mortgage penalty. To date, in my market, the largest one I'd ever heard of was $19,000. So that's a huge surprise. That's a huge hit on the back end if you weren't expecting it, and that affects what the net dollars are going to be at the end of the day. And if you're buying out your partner, you'll want to make sure that you are in agreement with the value of the property and that it's fair. This is where we as realtors can come in and help provide a current market evaluation to help determine a price. If that fails and they're still not agreeable to it, another option would be to hire a certified appraiser to assess the value. If the person who's buying the other partner out needs to get a mortgage, their lender may be able to utilize that same appraisal to facilitate the mortgage, and then that'll save them the dollars and cents to paying a second one. Having a separation agreement in place is going to make the borrowing process that much easier, and the majority of lenders are going to require it regardless, because they want to have a very clear financial picture of what you possess. Do you have assets? Do you have liabilities? How are you guys splitting the bank account, your savings, your RSPs, things like that. So they want to know exactly how much you have and how much they can afford to lend you. So during a divorce, emotions can run high, as Nicole's already mentioned, and often people are not thinking as clearly. So this is where enlisting, the services of a realtor with your house sale can be beneficial, because we are really neutral ground. We're here to facilitate the sale of one of your largest assets, and we're working to be fair and equitable to both parties. We're not taking sides. We're not here to be a judge with regards to that. So having an impartial third party can really help the process move along, give you a different perspective, a different opinion. And in certain cases, if it's really bad, sometimes two realtors are requested to be involved in the listing side, where each party has their own agent to deal with, so that there's a buffer between the two parties that are fighting. But at the end of the day, those agents are working cooperatively to get the house sold so that everyone can move forward.
And that's an important key to kind of hit on, is the fact that it's a point of moving forward.
Yeah.
So we're going to move over to our financial advisors. We have Kathryn Dean, who is joining us this morning, who is one of our financial advisors in the room. Can you just give a brief intro to yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Angie. My name is Kathryn Dean. I've been in the financial services industry since 1999. So I've seen my share of both parties, wealth management with both parties, getting divorced, one spouse coming to me to ask questions about divorce before the divorce happens, and then also managing assets once the divorce is complete, and being brought in by professionals, mainly divorce attorneys or mediation specialists, on both fronts of getting prepared for divorce, or can you help me with some financials with divorce? And then could you help my client after the divorce? So been around the block. I myself 10 years ago went through my own divorce, and it was amicable, and now also have a blended family. So I've been around the block a few times when it comes to this subject. So I'm glad that I can be here to contribute to your panel. Thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. So glad that you're here. So what common financial mistakes do parties make when separating?
Good question. And I appreciate Nicole and Betty both sharing their expertise, because I've seen it where a lot of times there's one spouse, like Nicole was saying, that really isn't aware of all the finances or all the moving parts within their family dynamic. And that is a lot of what I see that comes to the table, is there is always one more dominant spouse when it comes to the financial conversation. And that leads to a lot of uncertainty, because sometimes, or I should say a majority of the time, the person that is leaving the relationship or wants to leave the relationship is the one that doesn't financially know all the moving parts. And that could also be, maybe there's a business, a cash business. Maybe they've never looked at their tax returns. Maybe they don't know where all the income's coming from and where the monies are going out, or there might be some credit card debt. That comes up a lot. I shouldn't say some, a lot of the times that comes up, where one spouse is utilizing the credit cards to either build a business on the side or do other things on the side that the one spouse is unaware of. So it's really to financially inform yourself before you make the decision to walk out the door or to ask for a divorce, as far as where financially as a couple you stand, so that you are prepared. And maybe it's having a preliminary conversation. Highly, highly recommend to get educated on what your rights are. I'm in New York myself. I'm on Long Island. And New York's laws are different than the next state, different than Canada, right? So there's so many different aspects to it. But be in the conversation before you decide to make the decision, so that you know what your rights are, for sure. And also, and sorry about that, can I just add one more thing? One of the big things also is, I know Betty's talking about selling a house, but there's usually a spouse that wants to, because the emotional tie, stay in the house. And sometimes they become house poor because they've decided to stay in the house and pay that mortgage, and can't financially sustain the living with the income that they're getting from either their ex-spouse or their position, their job or business that they own.
Absolutely. So key. So what are some easy steps to take to protect assets?
Terrific. Well, one thing that I always talk about with both spouses is to have some sort of insurance, more so when you have children, right? I'm going to speak mainly with when there's children. Some sort of life insurance to cover the other spouse in the event that one of them passes away, that really benefits the children. I myself really do wealth management. So sometimes insurance is the right fit to cover each other. Another thing is to financially be informed of really where your next 5, 10, 20 years is going to be, especially when you have children, right? Because there are a lot of expenses, when it comes to college, when it comes to activities that you may not put out there on the line when you're getting divorced, and may not be financially set up to be able to take care of them. There's also the retirement. I know Betty talked about the really knowing, and we call them retirement plans, right? IRAs or 401ks in the United States, but knowing what those are and knowing what your rights are to be able to basically take care of each other in the event that something happens. Even though you're getting divorced, when there's children involved, there are expenses and things that you need to make sure that you're taking care of for each other and in an amicable way. And what do you actually have the right to get when you do get divorced? So I find that what happens is people, especially in New York, I can speak from the experience here, there's some sort of maintenance or payment to the spouse, and then there's also child support. And after a certain amount of years, that all goes away, and they are still utilizing all of those monies versus setting themselves up for 5, 10 years down the line when that might end. So that's definitely something, have that conversation, have that plan in place.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That's so key. So we're going to go to our other financial advisor that we have in the group, Thais Bangala.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Can you just give a brief intro to who you are and your expertise?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Angie. This is my first time on StreamYard, so I'm hoping that you're able to hear me. And okay, so that's fantastic. So I'm a financial advisor based out of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and with Experior Financial Group. I have been in the financial services since 2005. And so I went from merchant services, purely just providing technical support for businesses. And now I consider myself a wealth coach. So I work mainly in personal financial planning. And so I have a passion for finance and wealth management and wealth creation. And I'm really looking forward to sharing my expertise with the viewers. And I thank you once more for having me here to share my my wisdom.
Thank you so much. So, is it possible to not end up in financial ruin when going through divorce? It's so expensive. How do you avoid that?
Yeah, actually, I believe that it is absolutely. Because as a financial planner, I always advise to treat divorce as a disability. So it's not something that we want to happen. We obviously, when we get married, we have the best intentions and we want it to last forever. But divorce happens, and we have to prepare for it before it does. So it is always wise for both parties to have a financial coach guiding them through fulfilling their individual goals, so they can gain control of their finances the moment that they no longer want to be together. So basically, to avoid financial ruins, preparation is the key.
Absolutely, and I see that as a theme going on. So preparation. When a spouse doesn't want to rake the other over the coals and is willing to walk away with nothing, what advice do you give?
I think, as most panelists have mentioned, the whole point is to end amicably. We want to end things. We want to be civil, and we want to walk away with our fair share without having to, rake any coals. Walking away with nothing isn't necessarily the appropriate thing, especially if your fair earned income is in question. My advice is always to consult with your financial advisor to instruct you on having access to your assets while being mindful of the other party's needs and also inputs. So it really is a matter of knowing your rights when it comes to what assets belong to you and what assets belong to the couple, and basically arranging for a civil way without having to end up in legal battles or having to give up more than you should have to.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. It's really really important information. We're going to move into our co-parenting aspect now, and one of our first co-parenting experts is Thomas Prettyman. Thomas, can you give us a brief intro of yourself and who you help?
Absolutely. So my name is Thomas Prettyman, and I live just a little bit north of Seattle, Washington. And I went through a life coach certification school called IPAC. It's international school. It's amazing. And ever since I started my journey about 2 years ago, I just felt driven to help parents. I'm a single divorced parent myself. And so I have gone through the process. I really want to help empower other parents that have gone through a similar process. I specifically focus on really building the confidence level up of after parents have, gone through divorce. It can be very, emotionally draining and take a big hit to our self-esteem.
Absolutely. So with the commonality of spouses using children as assets in divorce, what resources are there for parents to raise their children in a healthy way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of parents will go through divorce looking through the lens, and I'll echo some of what the other panelists said, that it turns into like a win-lose situation. We have a lot invested, and it makes sense that we would, try to leverage what we have to try to win. And that's our relationship that we have with our children. So the biggest problem in divorce on children is not necessarily the separation, it's the conflict that comes about within that separation. And so I really believe that the first step to moving forward is to determine whether you're in a situation where you can co-parent or you need to parallel parent. So the difference is that a parallel parenting is really for when you're in a high conflict situation where both parties are just kind of at odds, really don't have the best interest of anybody but themselves at heart. And co-parenting, which we've all heard of, is when the two parties can be amicable in working together. They can problem solve and really work together to move forward. So after you have really determined which way, which one of those parenting methods works for you going forward, you will want to look within and find out what resources that you have available to yourself, the things that are available to all of us. So let's see. So yeah, it's important to take stock of what we already have, which is, the compassion and empathy that we have as humans, our resilience, our ability to really boundary set, not engaging in the negative emotions or being swayed by what the other party may or may not do in the course of, or even after separation or divorce has happened. And then really working on our ability to be non-judgmental and our listening skills. So these are all resources that we have available to us all the time. And moving forward, they're going to be the foundation for, setting up good relationships, not just with our other co-parent, but with our children as well. So after we've really taken stock on those things, it's really important to focus on our confidence and our self-care. A lot of times we take a huge hit. The divorce doesn't work out, or the relationship didn't work out. It didn't pan out how we wanted it to. We thought it was going to last forever. And then we feel like a failure oftentimes afterwards, that we just can't do this right, or we're not meant for this, or just maybe we're not good enough. It's the typical thing that we usually hear. And so really taking the time out to focus on yourself and love yourself, go to the gym, make sure you're sleeping well, eating. Those are all really, really important things as we're going through this. And then once we really take stock of where we're at with our own emotional and our physical needs, then we can start looking for our external resources. And then in that, we can definitely rely on coaches, therapists, professional helpers, rely on friends. I have several great books here. Unconditional Parenting by Alfie Kohn has been a great book. And Positive Parenting is another great book by Rebecca Ains. And so these are all really good resources. There's, reach out to your local community college. They have courses. Udemy online also has courses online that you can take to to better whichever areas of your life you feel like you really need to improve on.
Fantastic. And I've used Udemy myself, and it's a great opportunity where you don't have to pour a ton of money into it. It's fantastic. Absolutely. So what are your thoughts on co-parenting counseling?
Yeah, I love counseling. about 6 months prior to going through my own divorce, I enrolled in counseling, and I had that counselor for about 2.5 years after my divorce. The typical thing that I've seen, it's important to note that in whether it be coaching or in counseling or any other area of your life, you're going to get out what you put into it. So sometimes I've seen situations where people are coming to me because, they're going into counseling specifically looking for an end goal, right? If you're going into it with the thought that I want to save this relationship and that is your only outcome that you're going to get, it's going to be very difficult to really open up to the possibilities of what that counselor is going to be able to tell you and what you're going to be able to listen and really be able to take action on. So it's really important to be open-minded and going into counseling looking for really taking accountability. When I went into counseling, I was looking for the answer to what about me was causing this situation to happen and other relationships that I'd had in my life to fall apart. And it was really taking stock of the things that I had said earlier and where I was, even coming up short to my own expectations. And so I believe if you are reaching out to a professional, it's really important to be open-minded about what you may hear and what you're looking for.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Huge value in that. Thank you so much for providing that information for us.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to move over to our other co-parenting expert here in the room, Christine Travis. Thank you so much for being here. Can you please give us a brief intro and then we'll move into a couple of points for you to cover?
Sure, absolutely. So I never set out to be a divorce coach. I'm sure any of us that have been talking today, we never started out our marriages thinking they were going to end. I never started this journey. I originally was a small business development strategist. And as my marriage ended and my ex and I, we had the goal of keeping things amicable and we were on the same page, but all of the outside influences, divorce horror stories, secondhand legal advice, it completely derailed our goal of an amicable divorce. And so I got into this because I kind of took my ability, like my strategy mindset, and applied it to our divorce. And so I developed strategies that really helped take our divorce from nuclear to nice. And as we did that, as people around us would divorce, my small business strategies kept getting referrals for people going through a divorce. And I finally said, I can't ignore this anymore. And so we've been divorced 7 years and I've been coaching for 5. And it's amazing. It's so rewarding.
Fantastic. Not the fact of divorcing, but that
I understand.
that we can take that and make a positive out of it.
Yeah.
And that's what I think each of us have done for this. So is it possible to parent in a healthy way when one parent is toxic or in denial that the relationship is over?
Okay, so those are such two different people, a toxic person and someone in denial. In coaching, a lot of times there's a difference between checking out and checking in. And when you're first going through a divorce, you have to remember that a lot of times the person who asked for the divorce, they're ahead in the healing process. They didn't wake up in the morning and go, I've decided to get a divorce. And that's all that went into it. They probably talked to a therapist or close friends. It could have been something they've thought about for weeks, months, even years. So that person, it has a head start in the healing process. Whereas the person who is told that their partner wants to get divorced, they're experiencing that right then and there for the first time. So there is always going to be a slight level of catch up, or maybe a little bit of denial at the very beginning. And so when that's the case, a lot of times it's patience. Be patient. Acknowledge the fact that if you're the one that asked for the divorce, let your spouse, soon to be ex-spouse, kind of have time to catch up and be prepared too. It's really easy to agree to things when you first start the divorce process. So many of my clients start out, they call me and they're like, I don't know what happened. We were on the same page. Everything was going great. And then out of the blue, they want to revise things. We can't agree on anything. I don't know what happened. And what it is they're coming out of that state of denial. They've realized that this isn't a nightmare they can wake up from. This is their true reality. And so it's really easy to agree on things when you think there's a chance to work it out. So if you're prepared to just be prepared that there's going to be time where you're going to need to let them catch their breath and know if they change their mind about a few little things or need some time to review, they're not playing games. It's just they've actually started to accept the fact that this divorce is happening. Mm-hmm. And then if it's someone who's completely toxic, and I know some people use the word narcissist, and that can be used in the right way. And sometimes it's a blanket statement that covers a lot of things. But if that's the case, then I always tell my clients, we're not going to really focus on amicable. We're going to focus on a healthy divorce that's going to work on boundaries, healthy boundaries, and taking care of yourself. One of the things, my mom got divorced obviously years and years and years ago. And I use her as an example all the time. She held on to resentment. It was a very just nuclear divorce. And I truly believe the resentment she held on to really affected her health, and it took a toll on her. So it's not only for the kids. I selfishly wanted to make sure that my divorce didn't affect my health and rob me of years spending with my children. And I want to do that for my clients too.
Absolutely. Oh, so key. So with that said, what are steps to take when introducing a new partner? If that happens,
Yeah. And so when Thomas was talking about the co-parenting therapy. So here's the thing. What I tell my clients is you can't ask your ex to do anything you're not willing to do. Mm-hmm. So think 2 years ahead, 3 years ahead. What is it going to be like? Because if you're going to ask your soon-to-be ex, if they start dating, that they have to provide references or they have to do this or that, then you need to be willing to do the same. So that's the first thing, is just don't ask for anything you're not willing to do. And second, my ex is a great guy, so it's not a bad thing. But there's also something to remember, that given where you're at in your marriage and the fact that it's divorcing, your ex may not want to listen to you. And so when my ex first started dating, he even asked if I had a suggestion of how he would to introduce the kids. And so what I told him was, keep it neutral. Don't go like in the same vehicle, run into each other, see if you guys hit it all off, and it's just something to ease the kids in. And he did the exact opposite. He went and picked her up with the kids in the car, just like spent the whole day. And it's fine, but it backfired in the sense that it was too much for the kids. That night, my daughter came into my room and she has this picture, and it was like a family picture of them at the zoo. And it was with his new girlfriend, them holding like stuffed animal koalas. And she was 7. And she asked me, she's like, Mom, can I put this on your dresser? And I was like, absolutely. You look so cute. Go ahead and put it on the dresser. Because she wasn't doing it to rub my face in it. She was asking for permission to be okay. And so that was no problem. But when I mentioned it to their dad, just in a way of, this is how I'm supporting you, I do want to let you know she's processing this. He just couldn't wrap his brain around it and thought it was something bizarre. But it was only bizarre because it was my idea. So we went to co-parenting therapy because I understood that because it was my idea, they weren't going to sink in. where we were in the divorce process. And so co-parenting therapy was amazing because she reiterated what I did, but because it was coming from someone else, it was so much easier for him to digest it.
Yes.
So I like co-parenting therapy. And even if it's coaching like this, if it's coming from someone else. So when you ask what I would suggest, be careful. If you have the kind of spouse that's not open to your suggestions, then maybe spend a little time finding a way to get someone else to make your suggestions for you so they can actually process them, is what I would say.
It's so, because a lot of times I know with my ex, that would be exactly the case. If I would say red, it would be black, or
yeah. And as part of the strategy mindset, don't fight it. Like, you work with it. If you know that's what you're going to be dealing with, then you find a way to still reach your goal and accept with the tools that you have. And eventually things get better too. So like Thomas was saying too, the parallel parenting and the co-parenting parenting, just because you start off parallel doesn't mean you can't work up to co-parenting. So, and even if your divorce is hella bad, it doesn't mean it has to stay that way.
Fabulous. You know, and that's where this entire panel is going to be such a huge resource. I thank each and every one of you for providing your input and your expertise in the areas that you come across, because this, especially divorce and separation as it is alone, is a very isolating and confusing time. And then we throw in a global pandemic just for good measure, and it can go bad even fast, like just completely go off the rails. And mental wellness in yourself and for those around you, especially if you have children involved, is so key. Again, I want to thank you so much for taking this time out of your day to put this together and to be part of this. I will be focusing on kind of putting it together for each one of you as your own resource, but I will be touching base with each of you afterwards as well to just get some feedback on what you felt was good, bad, and what can be improved, etc. So I want to just leave you all with a sense of thank you for contributing for something to be a light of hope, and that's my goal as an inspiration to others, is to provide hope and inspiration to others, and this came out of that source. So thank you so much, and I wish each of you a wonderful rest of your day, and sending you love and peace as you go and be an inspiration to those that you touch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Angie.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.